The film I'm presenting on is the 2001 ghost story and gothic Victorian horror, The Others. The 2001 horror film The Others, directed by Alejandro Amenbar, follows Grace Stewart and her two children, Anne and Nicholas, living in a coastal New Jersey town in 1945 during the Second World War. While waiting for her husband to return home from the war, Grace Stewart begins to unravel as she deals with being without her husband and her children's photosensitivity, or their allergy to sun. Both the allergy and then the mysterious arrival of three servants, Grace and her family descend into darkness and begin to experience inexplainable events. As a devoted Catholic, Grace begins to believe that her home has been invaded by spirits from the other side, ultimately setting the stage for a haunting that challenges the boundary between life and death. The ghost story The Others strays away from typical horror tropes by deconstructing religious and maternal instincts and portrays the ghosts not as a monster, but as a symbol and manifestation of the consequences that come of being unable to reconcile with trauma. The Others encompasses similarities of traditional ghost stories and follows the deconstruction of religious and maternal denial through a haunted perspective. By trapping the audience within Grace's claustrophobic worldview, the film portrays the ghosts not as an external monster, but as a manifestation of a mind unable to reconcile horrific personal trauma. It elevates the genre by moving away from external scares towards an innovative twist where the traditional roles of haunter and haunted are flipped, forcing an exploration of how we use ideology to shield ourselves from the unbearable truth of our own actions, which is ultimately revealed at the end of the movie when it is shown that everything that both Grace and the audience had assumed about the events occurring were actually not true at all. And before we get more into the plot twist and everything else, I want to talk about the tropes the story does use. So we have the isolated manor, which acts as a psychological prison. The drawn blinds, locked doors, and fog only further the spookiness of the story and follow traditional ghost story tropes and builds a suspenseful atmosphere. The darkness and fog surrounding the home serves as a symbol for the grief surrounding both society and the Stewart family during this time. We also have poltergeist, or the poltergeist phenomenon. This trope is also heavily incorporated throughout this movie. There are mysterious footsteps, moving pianos, self-opening doors, and mysterious crying, which all are Gothic and Victorian tropes. There's also the sensitive children trope, where the kids see the spirits long before the adults do, and before they even believe the children. There's also a seance that takes place at the very end of the movie, which reveals the truth of the film, that Grace murdered her children and then herself. This serves as the climax of the story while utilizing familiar horror elements and tropes. By using these familiar tools, the film makes us feel safe in our expectations of the genre, only so it could pull out the rug from under us later. The film is deeply rooted in its 1945 setting. As touched on previously, the fog surrounding the house is a physical metaphor for the Great Silence that followed World War II. It represents both a society and a family in mourning, trying to ignore the scars and wounds that come as a result from war. We also see the Victorian mementos mori, or the Book of the Dead, appear in the household, ultimately highlighting the period's preoccupation with preserving the presence of the departed, showing that the house isn't just haunted by ghosts, but the cultural inability to let go of the past. This symbolizes not only society at the time, but life for Grace and her two kids, as they anxiously await their husband and father to return from war. They also touch on Grace's maternal denial. Grace's refusal to face reality mirrors the social denial and mental health crises that followed the trauma of the conflict that is only revealed later, not only the war, but her murdering of her children and then herself. Religion is a big topic in this movie as well. Grace's rigid Catholicism is her primary weapon of denial and coping mechanism against her husband's absence. She uses the concept of the four hells to impose order on her chaotic world, one that seems beyond her control. Her rules, as previously mentioned, locking doors and closing curtains, are medical necessities for her children. However, they are also metaphors for her psychological state. She is both literally and figuratively keeping the light of truth out of her home because she cannot face her own moment of madness that occurred at the war's end. The children's photosensitivity serves as a metaphor for existential and psychological blindness. Grace's insistence on locking every door and drawing every curtain is another example of a physical manifestation of her maternal denial, making you wonder, is she trying to keep the sun out or keep something in? As mentioned before, it is revealed at the end of the movie that the rules seen above are all as a result of her refusal to acknowledge what she had done, murdering her children and then killing herself. The director makes it seem as if these events are related to her husband's departure and time in war, when in actuality, they are all as a result from her own guilt and trauma and refusal to recognize what she had did. Typically, ghosts are the others invading a home. However, in this film, as the title suggests, the others, the perspective is flipped. The audience eventually realizes that the intruders Grace has been fearing the entire time and that have been shown throughout the entire movie are not ghosts and are actually the living owners of the home. This makes Grace the other and the true ghost of the story. In reality, Grace and her children are the ones causing the haunting seen throughout the film. This climax and twist occurs during the seance. This is a moment where Grace's repressed memory becomes unavoidable. The abstract idea of the ghost is revealed to be unresolved guilt. Grace is trapped in a circular history or a never-ending loop. She is haunting the house because she is stuck in the week she died, unable to process the murder-suicide she committed. The haunting only ends when the memory finally comes to fruition and is accepted. A big part of the story, too, is epistemological horror. The fear is rooted in the characters and the audience's lack of knowledge, suggesting we only see what we are psychologically prepared to believe. The general insight into the human condition demonstrated in the movie is that we only see what we are psychologically prepared to believe. Grace's fanatical certainty that someone else was haunting her house blinded her to her own reality. The film critiques how rigid belief systems can turn us into the very monsters we fear. It tells us that otherness is often just a reflection of the parts we refuse to acknowledge. And then here are a couple insights to the human condition mentioned throughout the movie. First, we have perception as reality. Humans use routine to shield themselves from painful truths. We have narrative trauma. One of the sources I use, scholar Stephen Burham, suggests that the haunting is a trauma that simply cannot be narrated. There's circular history, which is the past. It asserts itself over the present until the truth is finally acknowledged. And finally, throughout the entire movie, there is a theme of an echo chamber. Rigid belief systems become prisons that blind us to the others around us. Beyond its mastery of atmosphere, this movie serves as a powerful metaphor for the modern echo chamber. In a world where people often live in self-imposed information bubbles, refusing to see the neighbors sharing their space, Grace's story is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that the true haunting only ends when we have the courage to pull back the curtains. The film remains a masterclass in how we learn to live together, the living, the dead, and the truths one may try to hide. The Others deserves to be revisited because it transcends the twist ending to offer a study of isolation and the echo chamber of the human mind. And this movie ultimately serves as a powerful social allegory. And the film delivers a message about the dangers of fanaticism and the weight of the past. And then these are all my sources. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great